Why people look so serious in old photos. There's an intense pressure to look amazing in photos, especially in a culture that broadcasts every snap to the world. Do we pout? Do we look desirably into the camera? Wistfully squint into the distance? Or go old school with a thumbs up and cheese? The stakes feel high as we're constantly at risk of being tagged at a bad angle. Being bogged down by too many choices is actually only a modern problem, for photography among other things. When people first began getting their photos taken, there was only one pose available: deadly serious. It seems odd by today's standards not to look like you're having the most fun, but were people back then really that miserable? Or was something else going on? When you're posing for your Vogue spread and Annie Leibovitz is directing, you probably don't expect to hear, "Now give me misery in 3, 2, 1." But if you were getting a family portrait taken in the 18th century, that direction wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility. Take a look at some old photographs, and it's hard not to notice that no one was smiling. Sure, they didn't have high-speed internet, VSCO filters, or even running water, but was life back then really all that bad? Photography first began in the 1820s, and along with it being rare, it was extremely expensive. It makes sense then that the images were usually very formal, befitting of the high cost to create them. Still, all formalities considered, a severe expression is an odd standard to begin with. Because of the price, early photography was exclusively to the wealthy, and even if someone was fortunate enough to have their picture taken, it was usually the singular photographic proof of their life, which further begs the question, why weren't they smiling? One theory that's been thrown around is bad teeth. These were pre-braces days, and dental hygiene was really of no concern, so you worked with what you had. However, teeth weren't a part of society's conscience and didn't factor into beauty standards. Another theory is that smiling was also associated with madness, drunkenness, or lewdness. This idea seems a little loose, as it's also scientifically proven that smiling is a natural reaction to anyone experiencing joy. The real reason that people kept their mouths shut in photos is actually far more psychological than all of that. Our ancestors weren't trying to project that their lives were grim. They were conditioned to believe that a stern mug was the way to express a posh air. We have paintings, the predecessors of photographs, to thank for this bizarre posing trend. Similar to early photography, getting painted was reserved only for society's elite, and it had long been done to the style to reveal minimal facial expression in your portrait. This probably has something to do with the amount of time it took to create the painting. It's far easier to hold a neutral face than a giant grin for hours on end. Although life moved slower back then, people still had lives to live. In the early days of photography, long exposure times also had people holding poses for an extended period. Nothing comparable to modeling for a painting, but certainly longer than felt natural. Fortunately, by the 1850s, technology advanced to allow photos to be captured within seconds. But old habits die hard, and even with timing on their side, people continued to look forlornly towards the lens. Things carried on this bleak vein until Kodak released a camera in 1888 that was actually affordable to the middle class. For the first time in history, cameras became accessible to the public, and photography boomed as a result. With each Kodak camera, the chemical processing was done for you, leaving amateur photographers with one simple instruction: you press the button, we do the rest. Kodak, specifically founder George Eastman, did far more than just put cameras in the hands of people. He also lent them a new perspective. Every camera included a manual outlining what made a good picture, and it wasn't what people were used to. Until this point, most advertising had been fear-based, a get this or else kind of psychology that was pervasive throughout the market, which targeted people's emotions in a negative and aggressive way. It may have been effective, but it left consumers feeling bad. When it came time to market their cameras, Kodak concluded what they were selling wasn't a threat. In fact, it was quite the opposite. Photography offered the opportunity to immortalize our visions, to bookmark a honeymoon. As the types of people taking photographs expanded, a wider range of expressions started to emerge. Getting your picture taken was no longer a once-in-a-lifetime experience. People were at liberty to be multifaceted, And despite earlier evidence, they were. By World War II, smiles were the standard. Smiling for the camera was never a natural instinct. It's a relationship we've slowly created over time. People began to realize they could control how they were represented on film. Amateur photographers could also control how they wanted their subjects to look, much like painters. As the medium of photography began to expand, it actually came to influence painting. It wasn't until the Edwardian period, 1895 to 1914, that we started to see people smiling in paintings, which was after it had already become a trend in photographs. Angus Trumbull, the director of the National Portrait Gallery in Canberra, Australia, says, "People in human history have smiled, laughed, and behaved more or less as they do today. In other words, naturally and spontaneously, in the private sphere. What's radically different is public performance and public presentation. Today, photography is perhaps more ubiquitous than ever. It continues to pull influence from paintings, cinema, society, and nature, and it inspires other mediums in turn. Yet with all the evolution, we as the subjects have stayed more or less the same, presenting posh as we know it best." Some people argue that this has created a toxic social environment, with photocentric media platforms consuming an average 153 minutes of our days. With so much saturation, how can we discern what's authentic anymore? How can we even know what's real? Check out these other videos from Let Me Know. If you haven't made the move to subscribe to our channel, all you need to do is click on that red subscribe button. Thank you for watching.